Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast with me, Kaz Graham. Coming up, why more farmers are opening their gates to the public. First, though, farming is responsible for around 12% of the UK's total greenhouse gas emissions, according to the government, and work is being done across the industry to try and reduce this. A big contributor is methane, a potent greenhouse gas burped out by cattle and sheep. Scientists across the world are looking into ways to reduce the amount of methane produced by livestock using feed supplements made of synthetic chemicals, tannins, fats and even seaweed. Asparagopsis is a red seaweed that reacts with enzymes in the final stages of digestion and stops methane from being produced. Sam Elsom is CEO of Australian company Sea Forest, and I spoke to him while he was over visiting farmers in Yorkshire.
The business was started off the back of exciting science that showed that this red seaweed could virtually eliminate methane emissions when included at a tiny dietary amount. So we're talking about 0.5% of the animal's diet. But the big bottleneck was that no one knew how to grow this seaweed and there was no commercial supply. So around a decade ago, we started the business to do exactly that. Fast forward to now, we have 3 sites across the east coast of Tasmania in Australia where we're growing the seaweed both predominantly in land-based ponds, and we're working with well over 100,000 head of cattle in Australia and also sheep in certain fashion supply chains, producing low emissions wool and bringing low emissions beef products to markets around the world.
How does it actually work in Australia? Because, isn't most beef and sheep farming there primarily grass-fed, extensive systems? I mean, is there much supplementary feeding throughout the life cycle of a beef animal or a sheep?
Well, actually there is, yes. So farming is as diverse in Australia as it is in the UK. We have both smallholder farmers, regenerative and organic farmers, as well as we have intensive grain-fed operations. All cattle supplemented at some points throughout the year, whether it's during the winter or the summer drier months. Lactating livestock also require supplementation, so we are able to get it to those cattle even in those grass-fed or grazing systems. So we utilise things like lick blocks, or we incorporate it into the mineral mix, which is fed out by the farmers, which is a similar practice that is used in the UK.
I mean, it's interesting because some consumers don't really like the idea of feed additives. In the UK, I'm sure you're aware, there was a methane-reducing additive called Bovaer, which proved really controversial a couple of years ago. There was misinformation spread around it, that kind of thing. How do you get around that?
Well, I think we have a very different proposition. We've done a lot of work in Australia with farmers across, say, the dairy supply chain, and there's been product available called Eco Milk in Tasmania across our major supermarkets that consumers can purchase, and it's been well received. There's some restaurants as well and high-end chefs that are now putting sort of low-emissions beef on the menus. So I think our reception in Australia from consumers has been very positive.
One of the things that we do know about it, about this particular red seaweeds, is that they do contain high levels of a compound called bromoform, which is known to be damaging to the ozone layer. Are you at risk of solving one problem and perhaps exacerbating another?
Yeah, this was something that we looked at really early on as a business. There was some work done by European atmospheric scientists that was looking at what would be the net impact of the ozone if we could feed all the cattle on the planet. And I think that the determination was that it was less than 1% or something like that in terms of the impact on the ozone. So we've got to put these things in context. What we're solving here is for a potent greenhouse gas in methane, which is the second most abundant in our atmosphere.
How have you been received in the UK? How did you get on with those farmers in Yorkshire?
Yeah, good. I commiserate with farmers, that we see when environmental policies are handed down by the government, there is tension. There's a great burden on farmers to deliver more and more. I think farmers are also quite accepting of the fact that they need to address this issue, and whether it be, to increase trade with Europe or other regions where there are strong environmental policies in place, they're going to need tools to get there.
Sam Elson. Now, we've reported over the last couple of weeks on how the High Court ruled that the Food Standards Agency has been overcharging abattoirs in England and Wales for the hygiene and animal welfare checks that they carry out. Well, the cost of inspections is proving contentious in Scotland too, where Food Standards Scotland is the body responsible for these. They've recently made what NFU Scotland calls significant increases to the fees that they charge meat processors, which the union says are likely to have a knock-on effect on livestock farmers. As Charlotte Smith heard from Scott Walker from the Association of Scottish Meat Wholesalers at the Royal Highland Show.
The cost of inspections have gone up significantly more than inflation year on year. There's also an inflexibility with the regulators with regards to how they work compared to how a meat plant works. If regulators are putting up costs, but we're being asked to bring costs down to consumers, the two things just simply don't square.
Although they might point out that their costs are going up too, and they have to cover their costs.
We totally accept that. We don't have any real issues with what's called official veterinarians and meat hygiene inspectors who you see operating in plants. It's really the backroom costs we question quite a bit of. You've got, sadly to say, a shrinking meat industry here in Scotland, yet the backroom costs seem to keep growing on year after year after year.
There was a similar row in England, which went all the way to the High Court in the end. Would you take a legal route here in Scotland?
Well, we've always had a far better relationship with Food Standards Scotland here. I'm not for a minute saying everything that they do is perfect, and I'm not for a minute saying that we actually agree with all the costs that they put on the industry in Scotland. So we are looking for change, but I think we come from it from a different point of view. And I think we'll end up with a solution here in Scotland that will be far more suitable to everyone involved. We await with interest to see the final outcome of all the legal case down south, and I'm sure some of the implications down south will have implications here in Scotland, which I think will be positive for the meat industry.
What would you like them to do? In an ideal world, what does it look like?
What we're asking Food Standards Scotland to be is more flexible in the way that they operate. So recognising that plants simply don't operate 9 to 5 every day, 5 days a week. And how do they provide that regulatory services to allow for the flexibility of plants' outputs? The First Minister today at the Royal Highland Show talked about growth, and he sees that the food industry in Scotland is central to growth in Scotland. So we think within the meat industry, huge opportunity for growth. Now, if we can get a regulator that recognises first and foremost that they're there to work with the industry to achieve the output, I think we can get a good resolution without any of us needing to waste a huge sum of money in legal bills and legal outcome, which is always uncertain.
Scott Walker from the Association of Scottish Meat Wholesalers. A spokesperson for Food Standards Scotland told us the charging system in Scotland was jointly developed by Food Standards Scotland and the Scottish meat industry and implemented with its full support. FSS and the industry will continue to look into ways to improve efficiencies. Farmers involved in agri-tourism from all over the world are gathering in Aberdeen this week to share knowledge, experience and ideas. It's the first conference to be held by the Global Agri-tourism Network, which was formed 2 years ago to support the increasing number of farmers worldwide who are looking to boost their incomes by tapping into the lucrative visitor economy. The network has members in 118 countries. They're expecting 1,000 delegates, and we'll be there too to hear what all the hot topics are for Wednesday's programme. So we thought we'd take a closer look at the growing farm tourism sector all through this week. I asked Professor Nikki Cannon from the Royal Agricultural University what's driving farmers to diversify into tourism.
Diversification has been around for many years. Farmers have looked for this. But as payment supports have reduced, they need to have a steady income stream. And the wider public interest in how their food is grown, what is the biodiversity crisis, how can people connect with that, provides an opportunity for farmers to create a business engaging these factors.
Farmers have done things like B&B, they've rented out cottages and all that kind of stuff for donkey's years, but there is just so much more to agri-tourism than that now.
Agri-tourism can range from the basics of B&B, but also moving up to inviting people onto farm for experiences, for educational purposes, or for retail opportunities, perhaps as touching barns and things like that, and opportunities to maybe see lambing. If it's harvest time, you can go out in the field and see what's going on, and maybe the opportunity to chat with the host farmer about what's really happening out there in the countryside.
Yeah, of course, as a farmer, you have to be of a certain mindset, don't you? You have to be happy engaging with the public.
That's a really important aspect. And, no one wants to be seen as a grumpy farmer. And it takes time. Because of the nature of what farmers are often doing, it's difficult to take out large groups. And with things such as the cost of labour at the moment, it can be slightly more challenging in that respect. And you've just got to make sure that everyone is safe during the process of being out there, and you offer the appropriate facilities for hand washing or whatever is required for the activity that's being undertaken.
Are there any benefits for the farmer other than the financial one?
There's definitely benefits of social engagement. Farming can be a lonely activity, and having people there can be a lifeline for some, having the opportunity to talk about what they're doing, potentially new retail opportunities, whether that's selling meat through boxes that they otherwise might not be able to engage with the consumer so easily. But yeah, the social interaction, some people say you need 5 points of contact a day, and that can be really hard on the farm. And so having different people on the farm gives the opportunity to think about why we may need to change business models, engaging in technology. So there's lots of skills to be learnt, but through that, opportunities of how that may influence the farming business.
Professor Nikki Cannon from the Royal Agricultural University. Well, that's all from me and the team for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.